This is one of the few times you're going to see a speaker on my workbench that does not have a cardboard cover like this right here. And the reason is I believe that the voice coil was dragging. Now this is not the Zenith that I'm working on, but in between working on the Zenith, I've been working on a Spartan for a fellow. It was a totally stone-dead radio when he brought it to me, and those are the worst kind. I hate those. I mean, they can be a challenge, but when I have other things I'd rather be doing, I'd rather just be some simple little thing. Anyway, it was stone-dead, and I had to completely rebuild the output section, put a terminal strip, and this fellow tried to repair it for a neighbor. It didn't work out. He kept it for about a year, I guess, and then finally one of his friends told him, well, I know a guy named John that might be able to do something with that, you know, no guarantees or anything. So he brought it over. It's been here about a month, maybe a little longer, and we finally got some noise out of it. But this cone voice coil, I believe, was dragging, so we didn't get very good audio. So what I've done here is I've shimmed it with some paper, and it's the only paper that would fit down through there. And then I wet the voice coil, cone, I'm sorry, I wet the cone with water and a brush and let it run all down in there. And I'm going to let it dry right now, and hopefully the theory is that when the cone dries up, it'll shrink and stay in place, and then I can remove the paper, and there'll be enough space around the voice coil to where it'll go up and down without dragging. So that's the whole theory behind it. I think it's not going to work at all, but we'll see. It's worth a try. Tomorrow morning I'll remove this, but right now I've got my signal tracer hooked up to the output right there via this yellow gator wire hooked on the end of the probe. And this is what the front of the radio looks like. It's a Spartan model 642X. Kind of a neat old radio from 1942. And the 6 means 6 tubes, 42 means 1942, and X means it's an export model. 642X. So let me crank up the volume here from a stone-dead radio to
federal money's on the way to help with watershed conservation.
To
the
this
head
right
of
here.
the Oklahoma Association of Conservation Districts says the EPA plans to provide almost $1 million for conservation work. Insurance?
Well, believe it or not, we are finally looking at an end to the long, hot... Leader said Jeff's, quote, hadn't been feeling well.
Anyway, I just thought I'd show you that. So let's move on to the remainder of this Zenith. You'll remember that the speaker cloth was in pretty bad shape. Mostly this kind of stuff right here, all frayed and everything. So I cut a piece out of the center with my pocket knife, and I took it down to Hancock Fabrics here in town and tried to match up something reasonably close. There's just no way I could find the exact fabric. I came up with something that'll work, and what I have to do now is remove this board that the cloth goes on, and it takes 8 screws from the rear, flathead screws. And there's the back of the board and these screws that go around the edge. One thing about these screws, they're old, they're rusty, and they're easy to strip out. You have to be very careful, have lots of good straight, constant pressure, work them out slowly. These, you know, you're not going to be able to just stick a screwdriver in here and start turning. They're going to come out. Not going to happen. So be careful. And it takes a while sometimes. Well, as expected, the screws weren't that easy to get out, but fortunately they weren't all that difficult either. It does force you to get into some pretty contortionist positions to make sure you get plenty of pressure on that screw head into the slot with the screwdriver. Make sure you use a screwdriver that fits the slot. Now here are those nails I was telling you about earlier that in-cabinet antenna was wrapped around, and down here we still have a little bit on there. All they did was drive a nail in, and wrap it around. Cool, huh? Okay, let's move out this board now. Once you get the screws out, it just comes right on out all the way. There we go. And there's the back of our grill and the front of our board. Okay, now to strip off the cloth and prepare the wood for the new cloth. Incidentally, these screws will not be reused. I'll stop off at the hardware store, my favorite little hardware store, and we'll get some good Phillips head screws and use flat washers under the heads so the wood doesn't ream out any more than it is. Some of these screws were put in so far, I guess at the factory. I don't know if anyone's messed with them, but you can see that they've been reamed out pretty far right there, and this one down here is so close to the edge that, and this one here is completely broken out. So we need some flat washers with Phillips head screws. Look at that one. That one's really deep there, and here's another one. So when it comes to stuff like that, go ahead and spend a few extra cents on it. Okay, let's talk about the cloth. This is what the original cloth looked like along this edge here, which is kind of nifty stuff, but boy, that thing is really messed up. This is the cloth I picked up at Hancock. It was the closest I could find to the original. They didn't have any with any copper thread in it. So we'll be using this one and probably be putting it in a vertical. This is kind of a sort of a vertical pattern, but we'll go ahead and put this in a vertical pattern. I don't think horizontal would look very good, and we'll go ahead and see how that looks. So that's our next project, is getting it hooked to the board. And a lot of people say, geez, how do you hook a speaker cloth to a piece of wood this large? It's not as difficult as you think. The cloth comes off pretty easy. It's just a matter of pulling it. The cement they used on this particular cloth wasn't all that good. Now around the edges I may have a problem, but when I'm all done here, let me see. Looks like it's going to come right off anyway. Yeah, it comes off pretty easy. When I'm all done here, I'll take my belt sander. Well, there it is. Got almost 99% of it off. I'll take my belt sander to it and go over it very lightly, and then we'll move on to the next step. I had planned to use my belt sander to knock off this little bit of glue on here, but as luck would have it, I get out to the shed where the belt sander is, and it has no belt. Don't ask me what happened to the belt. I swore I had just put one on there. I think one of my grandsons might have borrowed that thing and used up the belt and never replaced it, which is about par for the course. So I'm going to have to use my vibrating sander, and but it's not going to take too much to knock this glue off. The idea is to get it down somewhat smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you want to knock all this kind of crap off here. So let's give it a try. Well, that whole job only took about a minute and a half. Not too bad. That glue came off real easy. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do to prepare this wood for the speaker cloth is use some of this blue painter's tape. I'm going to run it along all four edges. One width of it. And then you'll see why shortly thereafter. The tape is all the way around the edge, and we will now spray paint this thing with flat black. The paint is dry. It didn't need to be a foot thick. All you have to do is get the black on there. The purpose of that is once the cloth is laid on the front, you know, a year or two from now, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, if the fabric separates, you won't be able to see bare wood coming through the fabric, and it'll be very difficult to see this black. It'll just look like it's part of the speaker cloth. Okay, now we can go ahead and remove this tape around the edges like so, that'll have to be it for today because I have to get ready for work. But you will see in the next segment why we did this. Dar she be. Stay tuned. I decided to go ahead and spray the other side of this board also before we continue. It needs a little bit of coverage here and there. It's some of the bare wood is showing. I don't like that. And not a big heavy coat, just enough to cover it. Okay, now comes the fun part. I took the board, laid it on top of the speaker cloth, and cut it out so I've got about anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inch border all the way around it. And the cloth has been cut. Now we go ahead and flip it over. And the next step requires an iron, a clothes iron, a regular clothes iron. It also requires this stuff called Heat and Bond. Ultra hold is what you need. Anything less than that won't work very well. We're going to put it on the wool setting, which is not too much heat and no steam. Now this ultra hold bonding is 7/8 of an inch wide. It has glue on one side. See the kind of shiny surface? The other side has paper. It's just a paper on one side, glue on the other. We're going to iron this on right here with the glue side down. And last but not least, it's probably the most critical item that you're going to need to put the speaker cloth on a board, especially of this size. In order to maintain a steady hand and a focused mind, it's important that you have a can of Blue Diamond Smokehouse almonds very close by. Every time you feel like you're going to get the shakes, like right now, I feel the shakes coming on. You just grab a couple and pop them in the old chute there and chew away. Oh yeah. Now I'm feeling steadier already. The first strip has been ironed on. All I did was lay it down there and iron it on with the iron. I snipped it off and then ran over it one more time with the iron. Not a whole lot of pressure. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. All you want to do is melt the glue on the opposite side of the paper so it sticks to the wood. Piece of cake. We got 3 sides done. I thought I'd give you a little tip if you ever decide to use this method. The best way that I've found in order to get that tape on the board is to place your tape on the board, line it up on one end, try to cut your edges square, and then tack it down with the iron. Just kind of go around like in this area right here. Give it a couple seconds to cool, and then roll your tape out holding one end, and then just go ahead and iron on down. But give it time to cool so the end is stuck in place. Otherwise it'll pull right off in the middle of what you're doing, and it's a pain in the butt. Well, that's about it for today. I'll go ahead and iron this on, and then I've got to get ready to go to work. Boy, this day job business is for the birds. We're now ready to iron on the cloth to this tape. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is peel the paper off. I'll probably do the bottom first here. I'll peel the paper off and then lay the cloth down on it and iron it in place. And hopefully some of this stuff is bubbled up a little bit. I don't know, I may not have applied enough heat. I'll find out later. It may just be the paper coming loose from the glue. So let's take a look at that. I only peeled it back this far on both sides and then along the bottom edge, and this here apparently I didn't put enough heat to. I hope that glue melts and attaches to the board. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and rip this last piece off right here. Get that out of the way. And now I'll lay down the cloth, totally reposition it the way I want it, getting it as vertical as I can. And I'll iron it on to the bottom first and up this way on both sides just a little bit. That gives me room to stretch and straighten, and it's a slow process of working your way all the way back to the other end. You don't want a sunk in appearance like you see right now. That thing will have to be stretched out and ironed in place. Alright, the bottom seems to be adhered pretty well. Of course, you really don't know until you get it done. The type of cloth you use determines how well this stuff actually glues. But after you iron it on to get its initial placement, let it cool. Let it cool completely. Let that cement or that tape cool. So when you pull on the cloth, it doesn't pull the soft, hot glue along with it. So let it cool down completely. And then, now when you stretch out the cloth, you don't want to do it like a gorilla. Just stretch it enough and then iron it in place to where she looks nice and flat. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So let's finish this baby up. Okay, that's it. Now hopefully it'll hold, and hopefully I got the line straight enough. Of course, I really won't know until I trim off this excess cloth. Now usually you can go ahead and leave the excess cloth on a board and then just slip the board back in. Unfortunately, on this particular radio, every inch is accounted for, so I'll have to trim the edge. I have no choice. Well, we ran into a glitch. This cloth did not take that bonding tape very well. Very loose, so I went ahead and just pulled it off. And what I'm going to do is mark all the way around with this black marker, cut the cloth, and then put some tape on the cloth itself, and then do a re-iron. Let's see how that works. Okay, try number 2. You know, you have to adapt, overcome when it comes to vintage radios. I once used a thin cloth, and it worked perfectly. But this is thicker cloth, so maybe it's going to take 2 layers of tape, one ironed down on top of the other, because of the thickness of the cloth and the coarseness. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Well, there it is, folks. Ironed on nice and tight. The problem turned out to be thick cloth. I wasn't applying the heat long enough. The tape on the back says to apply it for 8 to 10 seconds. Well, 8 to 10 seconds would work, I guess, for normal cotton type cloth. But when you're dealing with some thick stuff like this, I had to leave it on a full 15 seconds per area. Once I did that, the glue completely melted and it's now adhered. Well, that's about it for now. I'm going to go ahead and stick this back into the radio, and next time hopefully we'll get around to the turntable. And until then, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. Incidentally, this Heat Bond Ultra Hold, I think I got it at Hobby Lobby. No sew, 7/8 of an inch. Till next time, this is John.
I better get out of here while the getting's good.